Okay, guys, we're waiting on one more speaker, but in the meantime, I'm going to make some announcements. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Sandy Golding. I'm president of Beaches Watch. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Beaches Watch, we are a nonprofit civic organization here at the beach. Our focus is on the 3 beach communities of Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, and Jacksonville Beach. And our mission is to educate and engage citizens in the issues that are coming before our local elected officials that would have an impact on our quality of life here at the beach. So we do a lot of things like we hold monthly meetings like this, where we have speakers that are talking about issues that are relevant for the beaches. And so before we get started tonight, I just want to let everybody know there's agendas at the 2 tables. When you came in, I hope you grabbed one because there's some information, announcements on here, and then also there's a list of elected officials for the 3 beaches, as well as school board and Jacksonville and state representative. So you have the information easily at your fingertips. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns for your elected officials, you know how to get in touch with them. Some quick announcements real quick. I want to recognize the elected officials that we have here tonight. From Neptune Beach, we have Mayor Harriet Pruitt in her 4-star mayor cap. And as her support team, we have Councilman Scott Wiley here as well from Neptune Beach. From Atlantic Beach, we have Mayor Carolyn Woods, who just came in. And we have Commissioner Maria Mark in the back from Atlantic. And then from Jacks Beach, we have Councilman Tom Taylor. And is there anybody I've missed? Okay. All right, so a few other announcements real quickly. Beaches Watch Member Social. You know, we have this once a year, and we always have it in the spring. And we have the announcement here on the agenda. It will be Wednesday, April 2nd. So in lieu of our April meeting, we will have our member social. It will be from 6 to 8 at the Jacksonville Beach Golf Course Heroes 19th hole. It's a lot of fun. We will have food, and we'll have drinks, and we will have raffle prizes. So lots of raffle prizes. It's an opportunity to win, socialize, just have a good time. But we do encourage you to bring somebody with you that's not a member and just have a good time. So there's information about RSVP. We hope you'll join us. And if you haven't renewed your membership, you can do so tonight. Eileen Krimsky is our membership director, and she's waving her hand right over there, and she can take care of that for you. Or you can renew your membership at the member social, but you do need to be a member in order to be able to join us at the member social. So we hope you will plan to join us. Also, this is the 10th anniversary for Beaches Watch, and we are looking forward to celebrating that. And we have on the agenda we're having a 10-year anniversary celebration, so we hope you'll save the date. It's going to be Saturday, September 27th from 6 to 9. We'll be sending you more information as it gets finalized, but this is going to be a lot of fun. And we're planning to just celebrate 10 years of this organization and all the volunteers that have been involved in doing good things in our community, and we'll just make some fun out of it. So hope you'll plan to join us for that as well, and we'll give you more information soon. And then also, Duval County School Board President Felly, he's having a budget meeting, a community budget meeting, and the date is on here. It's going to be Thursday, April 10th from 6 to 7:30 at Fletcher High School in the auditorium. That'll be a really good meeting. We hope people will go out and you can hear the plans for the budget and I think ask questions and provide input as well. And then also we have information about the legislative session, which just started, so I hope you'll take that so you can follow what's going on with the legislature, the things that will affect our communities. So we will be watching that as well. So let's get started. We are missing one of our speakers, so we'll let him chime in when he gets here. So I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers. And first of all, immediately to my right, we have Dr. Ed Lowe, and he's a scientist for the St. Johns River Water Management District. Dr. Lowe has studied the water quality of the St. Johns River and its tributaries, wetlands, and lakes for more than 27 years. He is the district's chief scientist and former bureau chief of the district's Bureau of Environmental Sciences, where he led the district's team of scientists specializing in wetlands and watersheds, estuaries, and aquatic systems. So we're really thankful to have you here tonight. Then next to him we have Lisa Rinaman. In her role as the St. Johns Riverkeeper, Lisa Rinaman serves as the chief advocate and public voice for the St. Johns River. Responsibilities include holding regulatory agencies and those polluting the river accountable, identifying and advocating for solutions that will protect and restore the river, working with government entities, businesses, community leaders, and citizens to resolve problems that impact the river's health, and communicating with the media and the public to educate and raise awareness about important river-related issues. Lisa strives to make Jacksonville a better place by celebrating her passion for our environment, our history, and our arts community, along with her husband Mark and their two sons, Mark Jr. and August. So obviously she's very busy, and we're really grateful to have you here tonight as well. And then to her right, we have Mark Middlebrook, who is Executive Director of the St. Johns River Alliance. He formerly worked for Mayor John Delaney. Delaney is his Executive Director of the Preservation Project Jacksonville. A former print and broadcast journalist for 17 years, Middlebrook has been actively involved in environmental issues since 1999. And with perfect timing,
Sorry.
and then to Mark's right, we have Dr. Quinton White. He is Executive Director of the Marine Science Research Institute and Professor of Biology and Marine Science at Jacksonville University. Dr. White joined the faculty at Jacksonville University in 1976, having completed his PhD at the University of South Carolina at the Baruch Institute for Marine Biology and Coastal Research. Did I say that right? Okay. Dr. White has written numerous research and technical papers or reports and received grants and contracts to support marine research at JU, focusing on the St. Johns River and human impact to marine ecosystems. Currently, he is conducting research on manatees and king mackerel. The Marine Science Research Institute building is the first LEED certified gold building on the JU campus. So we thank you all for being here tonight, and we are going to start out, the way we're going to do this, tonight's meeting is focused on the proposed water withdrawals from the St. Johns River, because that's an issue that it keeps coming up. And so we wanted to give these panelists an opportunity to give you all the sides of the issue. So hopefully you will be informed when you leave tonight, better informed when you leave tonight. And each panelist is going to have 5 minutes to talk about their particular, I guess, perspective or any issues or whatever with regard to the proposed withdrawal. So, and then after that, we'll take questions after all the panelists have had an opportunity to speak. So, we're going to start with Dr. White. You were the last in, first out. How's that? Okay. Okay. So, we'll start with you. And
All right, thank you very much. And I apologize for being late. I wish I had some exciting story to tell you, but frankly, time just got away from me. I just feel like that. I've been in Washington, D.C. the last couple of days, and if you've been following the weather, it was 5 inches of snow and single digits temperature-wise. And so it was nice to come back to warm, sunny Florida. But it was fun to be up there. But I apologize for running late. It's one of those things, I looked at my watch, it was back after 6, and then it was 6:30, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So let's talk a little bit about the St. Johns River, and I hope I can sort of set things up for the rest of the panelists as we talk about this. And you've heard a lot of this before, but the St. Johns River is a unique system. It's wholly contained within the state of Florida, for one thing. Anybody know how long it is? 310 miles, and it falls out of the mountains of Florida All 30 feet of it. And basically, all of that fall happens in the first 100 miles or so. Now, I'm speaking in generalities, and Ed and I will probably argue minutiae here a little bit, but at any rate, and the river drains about 1/6 of the state of Florida. So it's a huge system. And it's a unique system in so many ways because it's riverine characteristic in some places, it's lake-like in others, and when you get down towards Jacksonville, it's an estuary, which is a semi-enclosed body of water open to the ocean, diluted with fresh water. And that becomes very important because that particular ecosystem is critical to our fisheries. 95% of the commercially important species you like to eat and fish for and things like that come out, have part of their, all of their life within an estuary. And so maintaining that estuary and that mix is very, very important. And maintaining that flow of fresh water becomes very, very important. And we have, and I've used this phrase a lot, but we have used and abused the St. John's for hundreds of years. And at some point you've got to stop and say, wait a minute, can we keep doing this and expect to have the system still respond? And the answer is no. I mean, the system is already saying to us, enough's enough. We're seeing a persistent blue-green algae bloom in the river, brought on by excess nutrients and the changes we've involved over the years. We have been dredging the St. Johns River for well over 100 years. It probably at one point had an average depth of probably 12 to 14 feet out towards the mouth, got a little shallow. You know the first name for Jacksonville was Calford because they could afford cattle across the river here. And we've dredged it now to 40 feet, 42 actually when you start looking at the numbers. We've seen a shift in our submerged aquatic vegetation. It's gone from Duval County essentially because of increased salinity. We have modified the upland system tremendously. We have filled in a lot of our wetlands, which act as the kidneys and filter water as it flows into the system. And now we're talking about sort of a 1-2 punch. One is, we're talking about dredging the St. Johns River. We'll just have to see where that goes. And we're also talking about now withdrawing more water from the St. Johns River. The honest answer right now is we don't know how much water we already take out of the river. And we don't know how much water runs back in the river because all the dredging and filling and everything we've done in the wetlands. So we've got a highly impacted system already that we're now talking about trying to pull water out of in order to, what? Water our lawns. We sit on top of a Florida aquifer that we get our drinking water from. And a couple of weeks ago, at a meeting that Dr. Lowe and I were at, I heard district scientists talk about the fact that we have probably already exceeded the capacity of that aquifer for sustainable withdrawal into the future. And so we've got to be concerned about it. And I don't think that removing water from the river is the answer to having better lawns, which is what we want to do. And so with that, I'm going to sort of stop. I'm not sure where we are time-wise. I'm going to try to watch my time, but I said we'll get into Q&A here a little bit. We can have some fun with that. I will throw a couple of numbers out to you because you'll hear some big numbers. Quick, I'll point out something. You'll hear talk about the St. Johns River has about an average flow of about 5 billion gallons of water a day flowing out of it. And we'll say, well, we take a couple 100,000 gallons out of it, a couple 100 million gallons out of that. The trouble is, it's an average flow. And it will go as high as 8 in real stormy events like we've been having. It can drop as low as 2, 2.5 during drought. And it's not the average that I worry about, it's these extremes. And what we're seeing right now at the university at JU when we track salinity is we're seeing a real change, dramatic change in salinity depending on rainfall. We're low right now because of all this rain. The rain will stop, it'll go back up. Why? Because the ocean is out there pulling salt water in the whole time. We stop to the next one.
Good evening. It's good to see you all here again. I enjoy coming and spending my first Wednesday of the month with you all. and thank y'all for having this discussion on the St. Johns River and the importance of it to not only Northeast Florida, but the entire part of the state, all the way down from Vero Beach all the way up to Mayport. It is an important discussion for us to have. And as Dr. White has mentioned, we've been very concerned for years now about the excess nutrient pollution from septic tanks, from fertilizers, both urban as well as agriculture. The stormwater industry, we're plagued with ongoing toxic green algae blooms. Last year was one of the most persistent and toxic on record. There were levels that were 200 times greater than the World Health Organization standards for safe recreational contact. So we literally had to tell people to stay away from the river if green algae was present. Unfortunately, there's already been 2 reported algae outbreaks in Crescent Lake as well as just outside of Palatka, and it's March. It's very early. One of those reports, actually both of the reports were in February. So it looks like we're going to have another season where we have to tell people to stay away. And that's why we're very concerned when you start talking about water supply plans. They're targeting the St. Johns River as well as other rivers and lakes for drinking water, for irrigation. And really what we should be here today to talk about is not a water supply problem, but a water use problem. When Floridians are still using 50% of our drinking water to water our lawns, we are not using our water sustainably. And for us to move directly to providing more and more water in unsustainable ways like river water, then we're just allowing and fueling that overconsumption. So what we ask is that we make water conservation a priority. We believe the current plan should only focus on water conservation as a solution. If you start putting other solutions like river water out there, there's no reason for people to conserve. And again, we're using 50% of our drinking water on our lawns. That's not sustainable. Unfortunately, we have a lack of enforcement of existing protections like irrigation ordinances. There are some good irrigation ordinances on the books to promote conservation, but due to budget cuts with local governments across the state, that enforcement is lacking. Educational programs that were designed to really focus on conservation and educate all of us on how we can do better, those education programs have been cut due to budget cuts, as well as deregulation is now relying on voluntary participation instead of mandatory. We do have a water crisis. Everyone's admitting that at this point. We're running out of sustainable supply from our aquifer. But we need to focus on aggressive regulation, incentives for good behavior and conservation, as well as making sure we're focusing on sustainable building practices. Unfortunately, that's not the case right now. Regulation has become an ugly word, so we really need to focus back on these protections. In fact, the district plan says that there's a considerably greater potential for water conservation if more incentives are provided, if stricter regulation is required, and if the cost of new water supply rises sharply. Right now, there's 2 plans on the street. Both of those plans are targeting river water. The Central Florida plan is targeting 150 million gallons a day in their menu of projects, as well as the district's plan that came out 2 weeks later has an additional 125 million gallons a day listed from the St. Johns, 85 million gallons a day listing from the Ocklawaha, which is our largest tributary, so that will have another pit on the St. Johns River, and then 35 million gallons a day from the St. Mary's. Unfortunately, these water withdrawals, as we mentioned, for a lot of reasons are unsustainable. When you compare what they're targeting for river water to what they're targeting for conservation, it shows that their priority is focusing on providing more and more water instead of living within our water means. The central plan only looks at 4% of the problem to be addressed with conservation based on a voluntary participation rate of 23%. When we have a water crisis, we need 100% mandatory conservation participation. The district plans look at savings 84 million gallons a day to 212 million gallons. Well, the 212 number is a good number. That's a good target. That's almost the entire amount they're saying that we are going to be short in the district by 2030. But unfortunately, we don't have enough aggressive tools to make that larger number happen. And so we need, as local governments, as regional governments, state and federal, to focus on these aggressive water conservations. On the river side, our rivers are already under stress. You came into contact with the river of the St. Johns this past year, you saw that. And unfortunately, these water withdrawals will only make this pollution worse. It'll make these toxic green algae blooms more persistent, more long-term, more abundant. It'll also reduce freshwater flow and bring in more salt water, which will have a negative impact on our wetlands, our grasses, which are the natural filters to help us with the pollution problems we're currently experiencing. So all of those things will have a negative impact to not only people and wildlife, but our economy here throughout Northeast Florida. The district is using a study that was looking at water withdrawal as justification that and is qualifying these water withdrawals as sustainable. And that study, while we agree with the district, is better science than we've ever had on the St. John's. We participated in the development of that work and applauded the result to a degree. Unfortunately, this study was not comprehensive. It had its main focus on the water quantity and it did not have a comprehensive look at the water quality impacts. And those impacts are quite severe, and they need to be fully reviewed and researched before any drop of water is pulled out of the St. John's for potential water supply. That study was peer-reviewed by the National Academy of Sciences, and they said, quote, that the study operated within a range of constraints that ultimately imposed both limitations and uncertainties on the study's overall conclusions. So while again we applaud that work and that science, I know the districts used it on the dredging conversation, they've supplemented it with additional information to try to make up for that gap, but we need to focus on doing the due diligence before any water is approved for a permit for pulling water out of the St. John's or any of these rivers, because they're all experiencing stress. In fact, the St. John's River relies on 85 springs for fresh water. The district is very vocal on the stress that our Florida springs are experiencing. When our springs are under stress, so are our rivers. It's all connected. We can't ignore that connectivity. And last, the process is lacking in public involvement for all the stakeholders that are involved and will be impacted. The majority of these decisions are being driven by meetings that have been going on for the last 2 years in Central Florida. They've had hundreds of meetings to discuss this problem, and they're creating water policy and water supply decisions in 5 counties in Central Florida that will impact and will drive policy and supply decisions for 48 counties with very little outreach. I know Mayor Pruitt was the first mayor in the first city of Neptune Beach, came out opposed to water withdrawals back in 2007. And there was very little, if any, outreach done before these 2 plans came out on the street, not only to the city of Neptune Beach, the other beaches, but there's without any local government outreach, without any local community stakeholders, while there's been hundreds of meetings in Central Florida. In addition, there's teams that are working on solutions and regulatory demands in Central Florida, and that work is ongoing. So the solutions team that's looking at the validity and feasibility of using surface water, using reclaimed water, using desal, all of these different options, that work's not scheduled to be complete until 2015. And those committees are not meeting in the sunshine. So it's very difficult for the public to participate in those meetings, and we've been going down and meeting and showing up to meetings, and they've actually strived to make it more available. But there's a lot of work to be done on public participation throughout the 48 states, throughout Northeast Florida, as well as that transparency that's so important for public policy. In addition, North Florida Water Supply Partnership is working on another model, another supply plan that will impact this area. That work is still 18 months out. And there's new groundwater models that are currently being developed to deal with some of the flaws in the current groundwater models that are driving these plans. So we believe it's premature to adopt the water management plans, whether it's the district plan or the central plan, because they're looking at unsustainable solutions without the public involvement, without the completion of the due diligence. So we ask to table these unsustainable plans until we make sure that these are reliable, long-term, sustainable solutions, and look forward to your questions and discussions tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank everybody for being here tonight, and thank the Beaches Watch for hosting the forum. I work with the St. John's River Alliance, which has been around for about 11 years. And I'm going to start off by reading a couple numbers and then talk a little bit about what the Alliance is going to do in partnership with a variety of different agencies and counties as it relates to water conservation. Using gross per capita daily consumption, that is what people use every day over a 5-year period of time, Duval County, the average is 171 gallons per day per person, 171. Brevard County is 107. St. Johns County is 135. Volusia County is 122. Clay County, which has probably the best record in North Florida, is at 133. Orange County is at 140. When you think about, try to visualize what 171 gallons looks like. You know, take up 171 gallons buckets, pile them up in your house, and that's what we're using per person per day in our region right here. The St. Johns County, the St. Johns River Alliance on April 3rd, we're going to be meeting in Lake County, and we're going to begin the process of setting voluntary conservation targets for each of the 13 counties along the main stem of the St. Johns River. That seems like an ambitious goal, and there's a lot of problems of trying to come up with apples to apples in terms of doing comparisons. There's some problems with the numbers that I just read to you. But the goal is, we're unique because on my board we have 12 elected officials. We have 10 county commissioners and 2 mayors, including Mayor Brown and Mayor Jacobs from Orange County. And we're in a unique position to persuade these counties to participate in such a program. And we've been talking about this. We had a meeting in Stetson February 10th, in which all 13 counties were there, 3 water management districts, DEP, and the overriding tone of that meeting was, we have to do a better job with conservation. And the St. Johns River Alliance, our goal would be, as we set these targets, create maybe a competitive atmosphere between North Florida, Central Florida, or a variety of different counties, would be to try to minimize the need to take surface water from the St. Johns River or other sources. That is conservation. If that's the solution, then that's something that we all have a responsibility to take part in. So look to see that coming in, like I say, in April. If my board approves it, and I think they will. Again, we've had good buy-in from virtually every county that we've talked to about this. They're all on board, including the ones that we tend to point fingers at and say they're the problem. And actually they do a pretty good job in terms of comparing to what we do up here. We hope to debut this program, get it started, work out the kinks with the numbers and the comparisons, and hope to begin it on July 1. We think there's some urgency in trying to put this program together. We think it's part of the solution to dealing with water issues in Florida, and it's all about trying to help modify people's personal behavior in terms of how they use water on a daily basis. And we'll issue an annual report showing who in our region, in the St. Johns River Basin, is doing a good job and who's doing a bad job. I don't think anybody really wants to do a bad job. And so that's something that we're going to be working on. You'll hear from us fairly soon about it. I have a couple other numbers that I want to read to you, run through, just to show you the impact of, already today, the impact of water withdrawals on the St. Johns River. City of Melbourne is permitted to withdraw 15.4 million gallons per day out of Lake Washington in Brevard County. City of Sanford permitted to withdraw 2.6 million gallons a day from Lake Monroe. Seminole County, 5.5 out of its Yankee Lake facility directly on the St. Johns River. The City of DeLand is permitted to do 2.0 million gallons of water per day. City of Winter Springs, 2.25 million gallons of water per day. Florida Power and Light plant at Sanford withdraws 65.8 million gallons per year of surface water for cooling. That water is returned once it's used in the plant, it's returned to the river. And the JEA is permitted to use 827 million gallons per day of surface water from the St. John's for its cooling, for the cooling towers of the power plant. So the notion that water withdrawals is new is not new. It's been going on a long time. Some of these permits have been in existence for decades. That's not a justification to continue or expand or do more of it, but it's a reminder that as Florida continues to grow, and we are going to grow, I mean, the ultimate solution to our water problem is to send 10 million people back to where they came from. and then everything will be fine. But that's not going to happen. And so the stress on the aquifer, the stress on surface water sources is going to be something that we're going to live with. It's going to be something that our children are going to live with, and our grandchildren are going to live with. And it seems prudent today to begin an aggressive program, almost as if we were in California facing a 100-year drought, and saying, we got a problem, because we don't want to create a situation where we actually get into a 100-year drought and have not had these conservation tools in place, and then try to solve the problem once we get there. So anyway, I'll be happy to take more questions as the night goes on. Thank you.
First, I want to thank everybody for being here. I mean, you're the people that will make a difference in this issue. You obviously care about the river and you care about how your government functions, and I most sincerely appreciate you being here and having this kind of interest in the issue. So the question is, why are we here? And I want to point out to you that the purpose of the district looking at the river as an alternative water source is not to create environmental harm, but to prevent it. The districts collectively have reached the decision that we can't continue any longer or much longer to rely on fresh groundwater as our drinking water and public water supply source. We're running out. And the reason that the districts have concluded that is from looking at the potential impact on thousands of acres of wetlands, springs, and lakes in Central Florida, and indeed in other areas of the state and this district. So the purpose of looking at the river, again, was not to cause environmental harm to meet the water needs of a growing population, but to prevent environmental harm in those areas that are dependent upon the groundwater resource to maintain these ecosystems that I spoke of earlier, these wetlands, these springs, these lakes. We're Floridians. We need to care about all the aquatic ecosystems in the state. And so, what did the district do? Well, first of all, it did a study called a minimum flow and level study on the river. And that's required by the organizing statute for the water management districts. And the idea is to determine the water requirements of the river. That study was done, and it concluded that there was a fairly large amount of water that could be taken without causing ecological harm. That study was peer-reviewed. Because of public concern, and indeed also because of internal concern in realizing the magnitude of the decision that we might be able to move to greater surface water withdrawals from the St. Johns River, the district, the governing board decided to go past the minimum flow and level study. So they funded a massive research program. This program cost about $3.5 billion. It took about 4 years. It collected together 70 scientists and engineers. Dozens of them came from out of the state to look at this, some of them from the National Research Council, which was the peer review body that looked at the work. 4 years of work, $3.5 billion, 70 scientists and engineers, another peer review. And the purpose of the work, he digressed a bit. One of the goals of any good scientist is to make a conjecture and then do their darndest to disprove their own conjecture. The conjecture that was before us was that there was water available from the St. Johns River. The purpose of this study was to do our darndest to disprove that. And frankly, that could not be done with all that work. It did appear that there's water that could be taken from the St. Johns River without causing environmental harm. That's the result of that study. The major criticism of the study that came from the National Research Council was that it didn't consider the effect of the runoff pollution that would come with additional development that would be fueled by the additional water. We agree with that conclusion. What I want to point out to you, though, is that we had been looking at the pollution issue for 20 years before we started the study on the consumptive use. That study was aimed at what would be the direct effects of the withdrawal alone. We are already aware that the pollution is an issue, and indeed I would proffer to you that it's the bigger issue that we face. These algae blooms are fueled by nutrients. And thankfully, there is a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, that's been set by the river, a lot due to the work done by the Water Management District that requires reductions in these pollutants. So that should improve. If it doesn't, it's people like you that need to make sure that those TMDLs are met. So anyway, that's my remarks. I look forward to the discussion. I want you to remember, though, that you've got working for you a water management district composed of people that care about this river just like you do, that are working as hard as they can every day to do the right thing and to meet their mission, which is to provide water for reasonable beneficial uses of water and protect the ecosystems that depend on that water. Thanks.
Okay, before we open up the floor to questions, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, I want to start out by asking everybody to please keep your comments to a minimum. If you want to make the comment, take about a minute or so, but we know there will be a lot of questions, so we want to give everybody an opportunity to ask their questions. So please try to be concise with your questions as well. So where do we start? Mr. Mick.
My name is Mick DeRocher. I live in Jacksonville Beach. And I'm usually the person that has the longest editorial before they ask the question. So tonight I'm going to bypass the editorial and just say that I am definitely against, deepening the river and withdrawing any unnecessary water. But it was pointed out by a couple of people that 50% of the water usage that we use is for our yards. And so just to get a perspective from the other side, from my own information, I was wondering if anybody had the data of the water usage. When I flush my toilet, it goes somewhere. When I water my yard, it goes somewhere. So is there any information or studies being done as to how much water that I use is returned to the aquifer, as it may be?
Well, there are studies being done, yes. In the water that you use to water your lawn, either evaporates, and a lot of it does that, evaporates, and that's probably the biggest issue in terms of the quantity of water available. And the way that you irrigate can really make a difference as to how much evaporation occurs. The second thing that can happen is that it can run off. And if you fertilize your lawn, you can carry with it the fertilizers that ultimately end up into the surface water bodies, and that's a real problem. Some of the water, depending on where you are, can also infiltrate into the groundwater and make its way into the groundwater system. But the real issue is that there's water loss through evaporation, and that the water that runs off carries with it nutrients, and even the water that infiltrates carries with it the nutrients that you added as fertilizers to your lawns. So the lawns do use a lot of the water in public supply, and the lawns do create a lot of the pollution that we end up having to do.
But there is no, nobody can come up with any percent or anything?
Well, I'm sure they could, and if you give me a contact, I will get information to you. That I don't really, that's not my area of specialty, but there's people that I can talk to that can get the information from you. Maybe Dr. White has.
Yeah, let me comment. It's interesting because Duval County, the Florida Aquifer is charged by rainwater, basically. We've got a water cycle, and so what comes up goes down, and eventually it can soak into the ground and recharge the Florida Aquifer, which is a layer of porous limestone underneath the state. But it goes, it's 100,000 miles or something, of square miles of the Florida Aquifer is huge. Alabama, Florida, Georgia, we're not the ones tapping into it. But here in Duval County, none of our water goes back into the aquifer. There are no what they call recharge areas in this area. So when you water your yard, most of it actually evaporates. Some goes into the ground. Heard an interesting statistic a couple weeks ago. 80% of our runoff that carries pollutants happens during 20% of our rainfall events. And so when you get a torrential rain, the fertilizer you put on your yard is going to wash off faster than during a gentle rain. Makes sense. The other thing is when you flush the toilet, it goes into a wastewater treatment plant. And then that body of water is in fact, that treated water, which gets rid of the bacteria, but not, and some of the nutrients, then gets discharged into another body of water. Here we discharge it into the St. Johns River. And that's part of the nutrients that we've got to worry about. And we need to do a better job of cleaning up that water.
Except all the septic tanks don't go.
Well, there's a lot of septic tanks too that are, septic tanks are not bad things, except that they tend to be, we tend to develop them in the wetland areas, and when you flush your toilet, then it goes to the septic tank, and then that nutrients go down into the ground. One of the things that, and we didn't sort of mention here that I think is something important, the reason the district is looking at what's referred to as alternative water supplies has to do with the legislature saying many years ago that the district had to follow pulling water out of the aquifer, and when it became unsustainable, then you had to go look at alternative water supplies. And one of them is this idea of using surface water. I remember 2007, I was at a meeting with Kirby Green, who was then the head of the water management district, St. Johns River Water Management District. And he told me then that past year was the first time that all three water management districts, the South Florida, the Southwest Florida, and the St. Johns River Water Management District, they got together to look at how much water they were actually pulling out of the aquifer. And they began to realize, and this is in 2007, that by 2013, it would not be sustainable. We could not continue pulling it out. Well, if you remember 2008, 2009, the economy collapsed. For a while, Florida saw people moving out of the state faster than they moved into the state. We'd be in a worse shape today had we, we hadn't had the good fortune of the recession, we would have had this problem sooner. But as it is, it got delayed a little bit. But we've got a serious problem with water use. One potential solution is reuse. If you took that water that you used to flush your toilet, processed it, and then used that to water your yard, then we could reduce the amount of water we're pulling out of the aquifer. The trouble is, to redo that, to put what's called purple pipe in, to get that water going back out where you could reuse it, is as expensive as putting in the original water treatment system to get water out. The other point I want to make, sort of what we're talking about this is, everybody here thinks you pay for water. You don't pay a penny for your water. You're paying for the distribution system, the treatment, and the supplying of that water to you. If I get a consumption use permit from the water management district and I put a well in, the only thing I won't pay for is the electricity to pump that water out. I'm not paying for the water. And so when you start seeing your water bill go up as your consumption drops, you wonder why. Well, the reason is you're paying for the system to deliver the water, not the water itself. And I'm part of the minority because I think we should start charging people for the water they use and charging them more for more water they use.
Yes.
But I'm weird, so.
I have a question. John Henry David from Neptune Beach. Florida was really developed big time after the advent of commercial air conditioning. But what I really want to know is how much water was in the St. John's before we filled in 90% of the wetlands and all that other. We're talking about what the average flow is now, but what was it before? And being able to take 100 or 200 million gallons a day out of it doesn't really tell me how much we already are taking out of it. What was it like before we had the big commercial and residential development in Florida? Does anybody know?
Well, this may sound strange to you, but in terms of the water budget of the river, it would be roughly the same because it's largely determined by the size of the catchment area. So the only way that the water budget of the St. Johns River would have reduced is if there's been a decline in rainfall. Now, in recent years, we've been in a rather long-term low rainfall period, so there is some concern that maybe there is a decline in rainfall. But over most of the 20th century, there were periods of high rainfall and high periods of low rainfall. So the water budget of the river hasn't changed. Now, Quinn mentioned there's been morphological changes to the river from dredging, and that's affected some of the kind of the ecology of the river. But the water budget is close to historical, except for the fact that we have a little less recharge because we've got more impervious surface, so the runoff comes quicker. So it's a little flatter. But that's the picture in big scale.
So the loss of all these wetlands where we paved them over and put houses on has not changed the amount of water in the river?
Not the total water budget. It changes the distribution in time of the water. So those wetlands would hold water, and then it would release it more slowly, so that the river would be a little less flashy as during between storms and droughts. So that effect has occurred. That occurred really in big time in the upper reaches of the river, where there were large farming developments. And there, what happened is the river became very, very flashy, and the district has bought back thousands of acres of farmland there to convert it back to wetland to try to get a more stable hydrologic regime for that part of the river, and also to bring water back to the river that had been pumped to the coast to drain these farms. So those changes occurred mainly in the upper reaches of the river. By the time you reach this part of the river, the water budget there is relatively small compared to the discharges you get in the lower St. John's. But it was real important ecologically in the upper reaches of the river, down south to Vero Beach.
I'd also point out that what probably changed, not so much as the quantity, but the quality of the water. And we've been monitoring the salinity of JU on an annual daily basis now for decades. And historically, we used to find this sort of, full strength seawater is called 35 parts per thousand. It has 3.5 grams of salt per liter, about 3.5% salt. So we use 35 parts per thousand as a way to talk about it. Freshwater is 0. Well, at JU, which sits about 20 miles inland in the St. Johns River, has had a tradition of salinity of 12 to 16 parts per thousand has been sort of norm, early 50s, 60s, 70s. And the last couple of years, what we're seeing is a huge swing in the salinity. And we'll get a rainfall event like this, and the salinity will drop way down. And so we're probably seeing